The Newham Monitoring Project is the longest running community-based anti-racist organisation in operation in the UK.
It was set up by the local community in response to the high level of racial violence that was occurring, in particular the case of Ali Akhtar Beg, who was a young man that was stabbed to death in East Ham.
We started off primarily working around racial violence and racial harassment, but the demands from our communities and the issues that our community were being affected by made us change our remit to also include police harassment and police violence. East London historically has been the magnet for new communities, for migrant communities, and we are just another step, a moment in that history. So the issues and the struggles of whether it's been the Jewish community that came in the 1930s and had issues around fascist violence from then the black shirts and police violence, or whether the communities that came before it, or the black seafarers who lived here in Canning Town in the 1900s, to the Asian community that came in the 50s and 60s, many of them to work in the big factories in Dagenham and the Fords, or to work on the buses. They suffered issues around racist violence and racist murders.
In the 80s, we had a lot of issues within the borough where black young people used to get a lot of harassment from their white counterparts at school, would be attacked, would be name called. And so sometimes they reacted, they reacted to defend themselves, but were very often found themselves in trouble. We documented cases of where families were placed in an area like Canning Town, where they repeatedly were harassed and attacked.
There was very, very little that the police was doing. The police either ignored the problem, ignored the issue, failed to turn up, or criminalised the community when they tried to defend themselves.
It was pretty shocking, the number of cases that we came across experiencing racial harassment. It was affecting the community as a whole in Newham.
The National Front was very, very active in the borough. I can recall specific cases around a pub near to East Ham Town Hall, where supporters of the National Front came out with their snooker sticks and attacked some Asian people right under the nose of East Ham Police Station.
The range of violence went from petty verbal abuse in the street as you were walking along to systematic harassment ending in extreme physical violence.
1981, we had the death of Ali Beg in East Ham, and that generated a lot of responses from a wide cross-section of the community to set up Newham Monitoring Project.
We had a police force that was out of touch, a police force that wasn't policing with our consent, but was policing us as a community, that felt its job was to control the community here rather than serve the community. And so issues around policing and our rights were very, very important. And in the backdrop of this, you had from the early 70s, the National Front very, very strong in Newham. Newham was the first place in the country that evicted somebody for perpetrating racial violence against a neighbour.
There were a number of high-profile campaigns in the early 80s, largely as a result of police harassment.
Racial attacks were, they were an uncrime. These crimes didn't take place. It didn't register on the police radar that someone could be attacked because of the colour of their skin.
The most famous examples from Newham were the Newham 7 and Newham 8.
School children used to be harassed and attacked on their way home from school, and on this particular day in question in 1982, some of the older Asian young people went to escort their brothers and sisters from the Lilford school. A car pulled up, 3 white men who they thought were skinheads and responsible for attacking the young people. Fight broke out, turned out to be police officers, were in the car, but uniformed officers turned up and 8 of the Asian youths were arrested. They were charged for conspiracy. And we had a long campaign, some 18 months. Case went to the Old Bailey and it was eventually thrown out. They were found not guilty. But here again is a case of Asian youths under attack whom the police failed to protect, but instead turned on Asian youths who were trying to protect their community. That should have been some kind of a wake-up call. But of course there wasn't any change. By 1984, just 2 years after that, we also had Newham 7, a repeat of Newham 8.
A young Asian boy who was disabled was attacked with hammers on Green Street, and a number of young people, when on hearing that, came out to defend other people and other communities, their fathers and mothers, etc. And a fight ensued with many of the people who were in this one particular pub. And again the police arrived, but rather than arresting the attackers, the perpetrators of this racist violence, they arrested the young people.
The lads from Newham 7 were on trial on charges of assault and affray. They could face prison sentences of up to 15 years just for defending themselves from a physical attack.
NMP was at the heart of that campaign again, and I remember quite distinctly the picketing of the Duke of Edinburgh pub in Green Street, where some of them used to drink and hang out.
There was a huge community mobilisation aspect to it, which was absolutely crucial. Knocking on doors, going around gurdwaras, the masjids, the community organisations, publicising the situation and the campaign, and making sure that when we were finally at the Old Bailey, that there was a crowd, there was high profile support for both the Newham 7 and the Newham 8.
At the end of the trial, as not being guilty of any offence, and hence the slogan self-defence is no offence was very, very strong around that time.
And we won the right. The state finally recognised that as a community, when the police fail to protect you as a community, you have, as a community, have a right to protect yourself.
I think in the history of British, UK voluntary sector, I think that NMP probably has to be recognised as the leading national voice in defending the rights of BME communities to defend themselves.
NMP first got involved in supporting the families of people who died in police custody in the mid-90s. There had been a number of previous deaths in police custody, which means either in police cells or as the result of some form of contact with the police on the street.
Ibrahim Say, who was murdered in Manor Park, a young, aspiring family member who died after the police used CS spray on him, tear gas.
His family had called the police to assist them because he was distressed.
In the course of restraining him, they used for the first time CS spray. It was currently at that point being trialled. They sprayed him in the face, and the combination of this choking spray and the position that he was being held in meant that he choked to death.
A death in custody is one of the hardest things that we can deal with. Every step of the way is extremely difficult. The entire process, from the time someone dies, literally from the instant of death, is pitted against the family, finding out who is responsible and then bringing those responsible individuals into a forum where they can get some redress, some accountability. An NMP's role is to assist the family in that process.
We assist hundreds of people every year, but some of those cases, through the campaign work they do, become known by the wider public, and I think that's a good way of understanding the kind of work that we do. Some of the cases that NMP is best known for, cases such as Stephen Lawrence, in recent years, Jean-Charles de Menezes, Ian Tomlinson. We worked with the families that suffered a terrible botched anti-terror raid in Forest Gate in 2006, and probably most recently the case of Mauro Demetrio, a young man that was put in the back of a police van and police use racist language against him. He was able to record that.
NMP was very, very central in helping organise those campaigns, having the strategy, this experience of community grassroots mobilising, understanding the legal process, knowing the right lawyers and how to build a campaign that had a legal arm, a political arm and a community arm. And the political leverage, we always said, is people. The one thing that the police, the institutions, the council, politicians are scared of is ordinary people. Stephen Lawrence's murder was a long, hard fight. And so as part of that, we built public meetings here in Newham where we showed the experience of the Lawrences, connecting to the experience of black communities here in Newham and brought those experiences together.
The war on terror, of course, led to the killing of Jean-Charles de Menace.
A young Brazilian man on his way to work, gunned down.
The paranoia, the hysteria, the feeling that we can do anything and should do anything that is necessary under the guise of the war on terror.
When the Metropolitan Police started to blame first and say that he was a terrorist, and then once we'd exposed the fact that he wasn't, that somehow it was his fault, somehow what he was wearing, how he was walking, what he was doing. And when that didn't work, then to try and demonise him, say that he had an issue around immigration.
Within hours, this story is out and would persist for months that this was the official story. And of course, it's the painstaking work of the family directly and the campaign around that to unpick this information, to question the information.
The thread between these cases is how we've supported them. These are families or individuals that are trying to fight for justice against, really a system that's really stacked against them and doesn't necessarily want to listen to them. And I think what we've tried to do is to be there and help them get their voice out. That can ultimately drive change, and a lot of these families have done that successfully. We also do community outreach work as well, and we work with the local community to achieve the goals of the organisation. Some examples would be a project during summer 2012, the period of the Olympics, called the Community Legal Observer Project.
One of the strong themes that came out of the Olympic Games was security. We must make sure that the Games are secure and safe from terrorist attack. And what must we do? We must basically militarise the whole thing.
We recruited and trained over 100 people from the local community to go out and perform human rights observation during the course of the Olympics and Paralympics.
To try and get a profile of what is going to be the day-to-day experience of people who are already under pressure, remember, from surveillance, from dispersal zones in the area, from stop and search, from all sorts of things that are happening anyway. And obviously the Olympics just gives added impetus to actually just escalate all this.
Having a role in these events rather than being pushed out is incredibly important. Apart from the experience of the volunteers, which I know was people really got a lot out of this from going out and talking to people about their experience of policing and being able to observe things and be there. People giving out rights information, having discussions and about what rights they had in relation to stop and search. It was a really successful project. That's the kind of work that I think we'd like to continue in future years.
The struggle against racism, the struggle for civil liberties and the struggle for human rights is not a struggle just for those communities being affected by those injustices. It's actually a struggle for a society we all want to create, we want to live in, a society that is fair, a society that is just, a society where we can live without fear of attack, without fear of persecution. And that's why NMP does what it does.
All forms of discrimination and injustice should be taken head on.
A fundamental violation of one's human right. Why should a person be harassed or discriminated because you're a different colour?
The fundamental issue around racism is not just the prejudice behind it, it's the way that people get treated as second-class citizens by the state.
Everyone should be entitled to justice that is fair within the legal system.
The fact that somebody is attacked by some mad racist is only the beginning of the journey that they go on. What follows then is an inability of the police, local authorities, housing associations to understand that it's important to to treat people in a way that they would do regardless of the colour of their skin or their background.
If we are to save ourselves as humanity, then we have to tackle these injustices.
To fight injustice and discrimination, to name it and to do something about it, because unless you fight it, it festers. Society doesn't function well like this, keeping certain people down.
But we don't yet live in an anti-racist society, because racist attacks still continue to this day, racist murders still continue to this day, and you only need to look at the rhetoric around immigration to understand that that language is the language that was used against our parents in the 60s and 70s, was used against the Jewish community in the 1930s. And the demonisation of those communities is also the demonisation of our communities.
Everything that we campaign for is for universal improvement for everybody.
It's frontline work. It gives people support that they can't get anywhere else. Take their case of injustice and be listened to, and to get some action out of it, some redress for themselves, but also to change things for other people. Very important work that we hope to continue. There's many reasons why it's survived so long, but I think it comes down to the support from the community. That's why we've survived.
This work they can do, you can go to an MP.
They were really supportive, and immediately I felt that, I had someone on my side, someone who could help me.
They gave you all support possible for us.
They care, they get involved. They treat you like people, like human beings.